no one can sort of make you move on. You have to want to do it yourself. And I don't think that it's fair to ourselves to put any pressure on when that needs to be or what that needs to look like. So sure, there's people that can help us and guide us. And I think it's super helpful to find a coach or maybe a therapist, if that's more appropriate, that can help you in the area that you're trying to work on or move onward from. But it's almost like you'll know when it's time. So don't force it. Allow yourself to be in whatever you're in. And then when you're ready, not because other people want you to be ready, because you're ready, then take the first step.
This is Emily Harmon, host of the Onward podcast. The Onward podcast features authentic conversations on facing adversity, moving forward, and discovering ourselves along the way. Jennifer Ballou is my guest today. Jennifer is a retired U.S. Army First Sergeant and founder of A Joyful Life with Jennifer, LLC. It's a life coaching business that focuses on helping women veterans and military family members navigate life transitions while living a whole and joyful life. Jennifer is also a speaker about and a true practitioner of resilience and joy. From overcoming trauma herself to being handpicked to help stand up the resilience program for Fort Bragg, North Carolina, one of the largest installations in the Army, Jennifer has a treasure trove of practical lessons to share that will help not only you, but others get through change and actually welcome it as an opportunity to create more joy in your life. Jennifer's nearly 21-year Army career reflects demonstrated success leading people and directing strategic operations, logistics, and training for multiple large-scale programs with multi-million-dollar budgets and 200-plus employees. In this episode, Jennifer and I talk about how she overcame the death of her husband, who was killed in action when they were both deployed in Afghanistan. Jennifer shares how she allowed herself to be open to love again and how she's taken the many transitions in her life and turned them into an opportunity to help others. Jennifer, welcome to the Onward podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor to be here.
So you are retired from the Army.
I am. I've been actually retired for 6 years already, which is so crazy to me. But I served for almost 21 years in the Army. I retired in 2015.
Wow, you don't look old enough to be retired, but yeah. What did you do when you were in the Army?
While I was serving in the Army, my MOS was a dental specialist, interestingly enough, which so many times I wanted to change, but it just sort of served me in a lot of different ways, which I'm sure we can get into. And I had the opportunity as a dental assistant to do some pretty cool stuff. So yeah, I stuck it out for 21 years.
Wow. So did they assign you dental assistant, or is that something that you said you wanted to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I enlisted in the Army when I was 18 and thought I knew everything about my life ahead. As it turns out, I knew nothing. But no one in my family had ever really served in any of the services in recent years for me to really talk to about it. I thought that I wanted to be in the medical field. I wanted to be a nurse. And so to me at the time, just sort of getting into the medical arena seemed like a really good first step. And as it turns out, the medical world is not somewhere I want to be at all. So that's sort of how it began.
Okay. Well, it's kind of like when you're 18 and you don't really know much about the military and they're telling you what you're going to do. You're like, okay, whatever. You don't really realize that you could possibly speak up and that you could have an opinion and that you could say you wanted to do something else, and you probably don't even know all the options that are available to you.
Exactly.
You're just happy to be in, to be out of the house, to have a job, to be able to serve.
Exactly.
So your husband was in the Army too?
He was, yeah. We met in Vicenza, Italy. We were both stationed there. And so that's where we initially met. And yeah, he was serving as well. When we met, actually, I was getting promoted to sergeant first class. And it's actually a funny story because there was a girlfriend who was a mutual friend of ours who kept saying, you need to meet this guy. And I'm just like, I don't do this hookup thing. And so she brought him to my promotion. And I thought that he was a particular rank, that it turns out he was nowhere near that rank. And so I had to sort of get over some initial judgments. But once we started to chat, that didn't even matter.
So you were ranked higher than him at the time or something?
Quite a bit. Yeah, okay. Quite a bit.
Okay. Yeah. So you met in Italy. Was it hard to get stationed together?
Well, that's where we just happened to both be stationed when we met.
Right.
And so we started dating. He actually deployed maybe like a month or two after we started dating. And so initially it was just kind of like, we'll see what happens sort of thing. And he came back a year later and things were still going well. And so a few years later, we ended up getting married and leaving Italy and going back to the United States to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is where we were stationed next.
Oh, okay. And he was deployed to Afghanistan and you were too at the same time?
Yeah. So fast forward a few years, there were a few other deployments in there for him along the way. But yeah, there was a period of time where we were both going to be there. He was actually at the end of his deployment. And as I was arriving,
oh my gosh.
He would only be there for
you're going to be it wasn't at the same time. He was leaving, you were arriving. Oh my gosh.
Correct. But for our kids, it was the best because there would only be a short period of time that neither one of us would be there. So in the best case scenario, I suppose we thought that was it.
How old were your children?
2 and 11. 10 or 11.
Who was watching them when you came over and he was still there?
Yeah, we had some really supportive family that was helping us out for this period of time that we would both be gone.
Okay. And so you were both over there, but then what was your husband's role in Afghanistan?
Yeah, he was an infantryman. So he was fighting, right? He was on missions, doing all kinds of interesting stuff. And although, we knew that it was not a strong possibility, but I knew what he did. And we knew it was a possibility that something could happen. I never really anticipated that what actually happened would. I had been there about 6 or 7 weeks, and I was notified that it was actually his last patrol before he was going to start heading back to the United States. He stepped on an IED and initially lost his left leg and needed to be taken somewhere, a hospital that could treat him. And I was notified around that time that because I was not in the same place, I was hours away from where he was. So they had to get me there. And so I had some time on the plane to kind of reflect on, gosh, our lives sure are going to be different now. Eddie doesn't have a left leg and it's fine. We're going to get through this. He's a fighter. And I just never thought that when I got to the hospital that he wouldn't be alive any longer.
Wow.
Yeah. So I got there and he had passed away not too long before that. It was minutes before his 35th birthday, June 24th, 2010.
What did he pass away from then?
Loss of blood, actually, is what he ended up passing away from, because when he initially got injured to the time when they came under attack and, they just weren't able to get him out of there immediately. He went into shock and ultimately he died from loss of blood.
So that I just try to put myself in that situation. It's really hard to do, but you can just imagine going on the flight, you're going to see your husband who's, missing a leg. You're thinking about how life's going to be different for yourself and your kids. And then you get there and he's not there anymore, not alive anymore. That's really hard.
So hard. So, I mean, I always say that in that moment, everything that I thought was so important no longer was, right? So I just knew that I was going to serve in the Army for the most amount of time I could. I was going to make it to the highest enlisted rank. That was just really what my focus was. And all of a sudden, none of that mattered anymore. It was really my two children who I had to be there for, right?
Were you able to go home after that?
Yes. So I ended up, this is obviously not like the common way that these types of things happen. And so I ended up escorting his body back to the United States. We went to Dover. And then from there, I went to where my kids were in Ohio with my family and shared the news with them. And then we all went back home to North Carolina together, which is where we were stationed. And there was some big decisions there too. I was the first sergeant of a company of soldiers at the time who we had been preparing for this deployment for so long. We were the first dental company to deploy to Afghanistan. And so then it's like, do I go back with them or not? And ultimately decided not to, but that was another sort of loss that I had to navigate as well. It was tough.
Yeah. You feel like you're going to leave. If you haven't served in the military, you may not really understand it, but you feel like you're going to let all those people down that you've really trained with. And you know that all the training that you went through to get there. And I mean, not that you're not replaceable or irreplaceable, but you just feel a kinship to all those people that you trained with. And so did you have just somebody mail your stuff back? You didn't go back?
Yeah, they eventually got all my stuff together and sent it back. I mean, it wasn't a quick decision. I took a while to make that decision because there was just so much at once. But yeah, eventually they mailed my stuff back. They mailed his stuff back. I mean, it just was kind of like this slow, drawn out, just when you think you're feeling a little bit better, something else kind of comes along. And I'm extremely grateful for the tremendous support I had from the people that I was serving with, family and friends. I mean, I had such wonderful support. I can't even imagine how I would have navigated it all without that.
Yeah. No, I can relate, but I don't know exactly what you've gone through, but I can relate a little bit, how when we just try to put ourselves in someone else's shoes or figure out like what in our life has happened that we can then relate a little bit more to what you're going through. And so I would say a couple of years ago, I've talked about it on the podcast, but my children's father died and we had been divorced for a long time, but it was still really hard. And then there's always still, even though it's been 2 years, like a gut punch every once in a while where someone calls and asks for him or a letter comes, something addressed to him, or right now I'm doing the taxes and it's just, and I looked in the files and I see this picture of him and it's just really hard. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think that loss in general is hard. It's like, no matter what the situation is or who it is or how prepared or how unprepared, it doesn't matter. It's tough.
He was so young. So how have your children handled it? You had like kids at two completely different ages, 11 and 2.
Yeah, I think everyone just sort of did the best that they could. I am a firm believer that children sort of model the attitude that we have about things. And so I really tried my best. And I still, to this day, almost 11 years later, try to model that it's okay to be sad, to feel this big, huge sense of loss, but also we're going to be okay. And obviously that has sort of changed and morphed over the years. Our son, Eddie, I mean, he just doesn't have any memories of his father, which is really, really sad. And then Alexis, my daughter, who was a little bit older, obviously has memories and is able to just sort of talk about certain things that she still remembers. So yeah, they were just in two completely different places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really hard. I don't know if you ever I follow this woman called, her name is Michelle, but She's the One Fit Widow. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I've been on a couple of retreats with her. I was supposed to go to Peru with her coming up. I've been to Sedona, but she talks a lot about that. Like she was, her husband died in a plane crash when her kids were really young. And then she's remarried and she shares a lot about that. I don't know if you're remarried, but she shares a lot about the challenges there. And it's just so hard. I mean, they have a father on earth and a father in heaven, and how she handles it. And she's very open about sharing everything that she's going through.
Absolutely. I can relate to that in a lot of different ways. And I've never met her, but I am familiar with her work and I follow her. But I am remarried as well. And I'm sure we'll get to that at some point. It's been a process, but I'm in a wonderful place. But you mentioned like sometimes something will happen and it's kind of like a gut punch. And that's just a great way to say it. It's like, that doesn't mean that we don't miss Eddie or think about Eddie or anything like that. But I have found myself in a place to move on and allow myself to love again and be loved with an amazing man who, is willing to support us on this journey. And I just think that's a really awesome, beautiful thing.
Yeah, no, it is. It's got to be hard for someone to come in when somebody's passed away and they can't take that person's place. And how do they feel when you get sad about that person being gone? It takes somebody with a big heart to do that.
I agree. I always think if the tables were turned, if I would be a confident enough person to be able to do that. I'm not sure it takes a special person to be able to do that.
Yeah. Does he have any kids?
Well, he does now. So you mentioned that I had 2 kids in 2 completely different places. So my husband's name is Omari. We got married in 2018 and he had never been married and didn't have any kids. And when we started dating, I remember like, I'm never getting married again. And I'm surely not having any kids. I was retired from the Army. Like, who has kids after they retire? Well, I do. So she's a little over 2 now. We have a daughter named Sophia who's 2, and she's just been such a blessing. She's brought so much joy into our lives. So I have 3 children that were born in 3 different decades. And it's interesting.
That's interesting. Wow. So what happened and how did you move onward after that? How did you take care of yourself? How did you move forward?
Well, first of all, it took quite a few years for me to really even recognize that I was ready to start maybe doing a little bit more work within myself to be able to move onward. I initially, shortly after Eddie died, started doing a lot of work with the Army on their resilience program. I don't know if you're familiar with it or have ever heard of it, but I started doing the work at Fort Bragg. And then I went to the Pentagon to work on the Army staff there. And around that time, like 2013-ish, which was, I guess, about 3 years after Eddie died, I discovered the work of Brene Brown. Are you familiar with her?
Yeah.
And there's a particular thing that struck me with her work that I just guess I stumbled on it when I was ready for it. But it was like, if you don't allow yourself to feel and experience the hard emotions and the pain, then you're never going to be able to experience fully the beautiful emotions, the happiness, the love. And it just kind of sat with me. And it's like, man, I probably need to start leaning in and dealing with all this stuff that I've just been kind of putting to the side. And so without going on and on, I did seek therapy and started just facing some of these tough things that I hadn't dealt with, and found myself in a place where I started to live again and feel happy. And around that time, well, I had met Omari before that, but years later, we still would kind of chit chat here and there. I thought, man, this is a really great guy. And I think I might be ready to give it a try. But again, I feel like it's hard to articulate in a short period of time how much work went into me getting there. And I think moving onward, no matter what your situation is, whether it's like after a loss like mine or something different, like you don't really know what that next chapter is going to look like. I mean, I never thought I want to be in another relationship or married again. But I think when you open yourself up to the possibilities that are out there, that's when you're able to start seeing what they might be, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. I had a guest say that when you ignore your feelings or push them down to the basement, they go lift weights.
I love that.
Yeah, I do too, because I did that for the longest time when I got divorced from my kid's dad. And then when I retired, right after I retired, he passed away, and I hadn't dealt with a lot of the stuff because I had just been head down. You just got to keep plowing through. You just got to keep moving on. You had kids to take care of, but you got to take care of yourself too, right?
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, yeah, for the longest time, it was just all about the kids, and I was still serving, and I continued to serve. So it was about that and the kids. And I just didn't really ever set the time aside for myself and my own healing. And, healing isn't something that really ever ends. It's a lifelong journey that kind of shows up here, there, and everywhere when we least expect it. And I think I know setting the time aside to allow ourselves what we need and slowing down instead of living this fast, go, go, go life is really where the magic starts to happen. It's scary though.
Was it hard for you to slow down?
So hard. I mean, I still battle with that every single day. The place I'm in now, which is I have my own business and I work with women, veterans, and military families really on navigating life transitions. It could be big or small, but a huge part of that is slowing down. And it's hard. It's difficult.
I think in the military, you joined the military at age 18. So did I. There's a lot of just push through, just keep pushing. And I kept pushing, and I retired at 56. And I'm just like, I'm tired of pushing. There's got to be a better way. And there is, but I didn't know it. It's like when you do slow down, you get into a flow and things happen for you that you wouldn't see if you're just trying to push and keep making something happen.
Yes, I agree. Like I mentioned, I've been retired almost 6 years, and I think I'm just barely starting to scratch the surface on slowing down a little bit. And it's amazing how many awesome opportunities and things kind of show up, which may have shown up before, but if you don't slow down enough to see them, they might just go right past you. My dad always used to tell me, especially the years right after Eddie died, Jennifer, gotta slow down and smell the roses. And I would be like, you don't get it. I don't have time to slow down and smell the doggone roses. Like I've got stuff to do.
Right.
But gosh, that was just such wise advice that I think about all the time.
I think that just goes to show we don't get it until we get it. Something has to happen to where we finally just kind of wake up and get it. And you can't force anybody to get it. They just have to experience it for themselves. I'm thankful that I did experience it. I mean, I was just like, I do not want to be this way anymore, but I don't know how to slow down. I don't know how to just be.
Yes.
So my coach would give me these meditation exercises to do in the morning. She asked how many minutes do you have? And it had blocks of 15 minutes, a half an hour, 60 minutes. And I'm like an overachiever, right? So I'm like, I wanted to an hour. But I really don't have an hour. So I checked the 15 minutes, and then she would ask, she wanted me to do something for 40 days straight. She'd ask, well, what day are you on? Every time I'd say 1. Why? Well, I started, but you don't understand. I'm busy.
Right. Yeah.
The person making me busy was me.
That's right. I'm reading this book right now called Living Your Yoga. Oh, shoot. It's like Living Your Yoga. It's by Judith Lassiter. Okay. And it's about, so I'm a yoga teacher, but yoga is so much more than what most of us think it is.
Yes.
And it's the part of the book that I actually made a little social media post about today was she's talking about discipline. And she says that this woman came to her and said, I started setting aside 5 minutes a day to meditate. And the author, Judith Lassiter, said that right away she was super judgmental, like 5 minutes, that's nothing, right? But as it turns out, this woman recognized that that's what she had time for. And she gave that 5 minutes everything she had, as
Mhm.
opposed to maybe I dedicate, or like you were saying, I want to do the full 60 minutes,
Uh-huh.
but I'm not really in it for the full 60
Yeah.
minutes, right? So, like, just be wherever we are, recognize what we have the capacity to give right now,
Right.
and be okay with that, not compare ourselves to everyone else under the sun.
Right.
So,
And if you do that for 5 minutes a day for a while, most likely you'll start to say, 5 minutes is not enough. I need more time for this.
Yes. And you'll make more time.
Right.
Yes. I
But if you
love
start
that.
out at 60 minutes and you're getting all antsy and you feel like a failure because you're not getting it done, then you're not going to add more time.
Exactly.
So, what other advice do you have to give to the Onward podcast listeners about navigating transition, since that's what you coach, the area you coach in?
I think we really kind of touched on it already.
Okay.
So it's almost just sort of like a reminder that no one can sort of make you move on. You have to want to do it yourself. And I don't think that it's fair to ourselves to put any pressure on when that needs to be or what that needs to look like. So sure, there's people that can help us and guide us. And I think it's super helpful to find a coach or maybe a therapist, if that's more appropriate, that can help you in the area that you're trying to work on or move onward from. But it's almost like you'll know when it's time. So don't force it. Allow yourself to be in whatever you're in. And then when you're ready, not because other people want you to be ready, because you're ready, then take the first step.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. You have to be ready yourself, and I don't know why it just dawned on me, but when I was going through some issues with my son with drugs and alcohol, I thought a counselor could quote unquote fix him or this would happen. But, it took 10 years. It took 10 years until he was ready. And it's the same with anything, whether you're an alcoholic or a drug user, or you're addicted to exercise, or you're addicted to being busy, or you've got some other changes that maybe should be made in your life or you could make, and other people can see them. But until you see them and are ready to make the change and decide to make the change, no one else can do it for you.
That's exactly right. I think a great question to ask that person that you want to help and want to support could be something like, how can I best support you right now? Mm-hmm. And they might not know, but just being there, and sometimes being there just means being there, not saying anything, not judging. Sometimes we have to let them fall once or 15 times, but they know we're still there when they're ready is just so powerful.
That's one thing to do with a friend. It's hard to do with your child.
Well, I can only imagine. Yeah.
When you're going through it with a child or whatever, and it's good to have support, like you said, a coach, a counselor, other moms who've been through it. Like,
yes,
agree. Be around other people who've been through it that understand.
Absolutely,
it's very helpful to not feeling alone.
Yeah, definitely.
So, who's your target audience? Your target client?
Yeah, military veteran women and spouses. So pretty much anyone that is associated with the military. I think that, I always say, because one of the things I do is teach yoga. I recently launched a virtual studio, and I get the question a lot, do I have to be a woman veteran or a family member to come? No, everybody's always welcome. But I think that the military community, we just have a special bond, and we've experienced life in ways that others can't really relate to, if you will. And one of the themes, whether it's the loss of a loved one or something completely different, is transition. We all know all about transition, but there's a way to prepare ourselves for unforeseen transitions in the future. So that's kind of who I really work with, is women, veterans, and military families.
Got it. Yeah. And I'll put your links to your Facebook and your website and Instagram in the show notes. So
awesome.
Thank you for being on the Onward podcast, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Emily. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your story on the Onward podcast. I know we rescheduled this interview several times, and it was just so nice to finally be able to meet you. So I can't believe it's May already. Happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there listening. And I just wanted to share that it's been almost 2 years since I graduated from working for the Navy. I made that decision to join the military when I was 17 years old. And after graduating from the Naval Academy, I worked for the Navy as an officer and then a civilian until I turned 56. I have no regrets. I got lots of training on how to do my different jobs in government contracting and small business, leadership, and other areas of my work. And head down, I focused on raising my children, mostly as a single parent. My dreams became buried under a mound of responsibilities, and somehow I lost myself along the way. I retired in 2019 as the director of the Office of Small Business Programs for the Department of the Navy. Within 1 month after I retired, my children's father, Bruce, was diagnosed with cancer and became paralyzed in both arms. He passed away 5 months later. I helped care for him and my children, and I watched him pass away with regrets. Now, after the passing of some time, we can see the gift he left us, the gift of really knowing and understanding how precious life is. Since I retired, in the past 2 years, I've invested time and money in myself. I've been learning about myself and taking care of my needs. And as an entrepreneur, I've observed that there are many coaches and consultants in the government contracting space that are focused on how to establish a business and how to win a government contract. And all of that is needed. But I also think that as leaders in the government contracting space, we need to focus on ourselves. All leaders, whether you're in the government contracting space or not, need to focus on ourselves. And the better we know ourselves, the better leaders we can become. Leading business has its own unique challenges in this time of COVID. And I think we all realize the importance of focusing on the whole person. And by doing this, we can create prosperity in all areas of our lives, in the areas of our relationships, in the areas of health and well-being, in time and money freedom, in the important work we do in leading our companies. Live a life that you love now. Bruce, my former husband, was waiting for retirement. Don't wait for circumstances to change. What would you love now? Ask yourself that question. What would I love now? And then create it. I've developed a roadmap and a coaching program based on my journey, and I'd love for you to learn more about it if you are interested. You can visit my website, emilyharmon.com, and you can learn about the different coaching programs that I offer. One of the programs is also in mental fitness. Strengthening your mental fitness will also help create prosperity in all areas of your life. By strengthening your mental fitness, you'll perform better. By working less hard, similar to athletes in the zone, you'll feel less stressed, more peace, and consistent happiness, even in tough times. And your relationships at home and at work will improve, and you'll be able to handle conflicts in ways that deepen trust and harmony. Check out my website, emilyharmon.com, for more information. Thank you for listening today. Have a wonderful Mother's Day and a great week.